Hey, gentlemen.
Hey there.
Hey,
Hey, Johnny.
hello. All right. So, we're live, and what we'll do is I like to start off and maybe let's do some introductions with Solus, and then we'll move on to you, Igaze. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All
Yep.
right. So first off, we have Soulis Sector of Moose Army. And so why don't you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, Solus, like maybe how long you've been playing and what type of activities, and maybe how you know, came to Eve and what kind of keeps you engaged in the community.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, for me, I've been playing Eve just over 10 years now, since the early part of 2007. And, it's interesting that the community and the level of gameplay is really what keeps me here. I've taken some breaks and things like a lot of people, and I was kind of telling iGaze before this that you know I've kind of done a lot of different things in Eve. I don't think I'll ever be able to say I've done everything in Eve. I don't think anybody can. But that's the thing, is that there's so many different things to be able to do in this game. And like a lot of people, I started out in high sec, found a corp that was doing some mining and things like that. Actually, kind of interesting, my first corp I joined because somebody helped me out of almost being ganked in low sec, and so I joined them, and then spent some time down in Pravi in 2009 and 2010. Moved back up after our corp kind of disbanded, and I spent the better part of 5 years just running incursions, mostly with TDF and then with TVP. And that was kind of my thing. Had a solo corp with all my alts and things like that, and then took some time away, came back, and I had some friends who had joined test before. And so I was looking for a corp, and I pretty much knew that that's the alliance that I wanted to go to, and came across Marquis stream. And so I said, hey, let's apply to join these guys. And I never actually applied to join any other corps. And so I've been with them since late February, early March, and yeah, it's been a good time. And I kind of do the run of things. I have a tune that's Solos is primarily my combat tune in PVE, PvP. I don't do a lot of solo PvP like a lot of guys do, but I love being in fleets. And then I've got tunes that are just for production and mining. And yeah, it's been a good time. I mean, I love this game. I don't play anything else, really. There's not any other games that can keep my interest other than Eve.
Yeah, I think many of us would share that same sentiment as far as this is kind of like our main game. So, what you said that you started in 2007. So you've been playing for nearly 10 years. Obviously, breaks kind of not included in that. What brought you to Eve in the first place?
To be honest with you, I can't really remember. I think at one time I happened to see an advertisement someplace for the game, and I said, "Well, let's take a look at it." Downloaded it, and just started learning. Followed through the tutorials, which were even worse back then. And yeah, so just kind of floated around, flew around, did some things for a little while, and yeah.
Nice. Okay, so obviously, what brings you to the stream today is kind of an event that I think many of us are, I guess, terrified of, and it certainly happened to you. So those that don't know, what happened was is Solus got stuck in a wormhole, and typically it's like it's kind of hard. There's a couple of reasons why you might get stuck in a wormhole. One of them is you might be with your fleet and you didn't carry probes because there was no reason. You were falling behind a scout, and you all get stuck. That's happened to me. You might never think that you're actually going to get stuck. Typically it's like with like another fleet, or you have a scout, or your scout dies, or your ship gets blown up, and so you've lost any bookmarks or you didn't make any bookmarks. You lost all your probes, that sort of thing. So Solus, kind of tell us about what happened that fateful day.
Yeah. So, actually, this, kind of starts a few days before that. And, the thing for me is, I tend to rat quite a bit in a carrier. And, that's kind of one of my income generations in the game. And so usually what I do is before I go ratting in a system, just to be sure it's safe, I scan down all the SIGs. And if there's a wormhole, I would go through and, I would roll the hole, usually by myself, sometimes with a couple of my tunes. But so I, was looking at the hole. I went in with the scepter first, scanned down the hole, just to see what was there, scanned down, bookmarked all the exits and everything like that. And then came back, and because it was very large, I figured, I could make it through, with the carrier. And because I was the only person in system, had been the only person in system. And so basically what happened is, I went ahead and undocked my carrier. I didn't bother, refitting it because I figured I could make 2 passes and be fine. And when I went back through the second pass is when the hole closed behind me. And yeah, so that's how I ended up in the hole.
Okay, so you were just going to rat in cave space, and you were just trying to roll the hole with your carrier. Is that kind of was the plan?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So you like, just so everyone knows, I don't really know much about Solis's story of why he got stuck. So this is absolutely fascinating, because for a moment there I was thinking, is Soulis ratting in a wormhole, even though he lives in cave space? Who would ever do that? So you were actually just rolling the wormhole. So those that don't know how this works is that wormholes have 2 components to them as far as their longevity. One of them is time, and then one of them is mass. So after a certain amount of time, every wormhole collapses and closes just because it expires. It can't maintain its stability any further. And then the other way is that if you pass enough ship through them, or mass, that could be in the form of many small ships. That could be in the form of big ships like a carrier. But if you do that enough, you can actually close the wormhole. So explain to those that are listening why you would want to roll a wormhole if you were just ratting in cave space.
Well, the big thing is, especially living in cave space and in null, and ratting, you never know what's going to come through that hole. Even if you like me, you go through and scout it with a scepter, you don't necessarily know if somebody else is going to find a connection to that and come through and then potentially pin you down. And when you're flying a ship like I was flying a carrier that fit was close to 6 billion ISK. And with a clone that was another 5-ish billion ISK, that's not something you want to lose. So that's always been my thing. If I can, I will roll the hole so I can start ratting kind of in safety.
Wow. So did you learn this from experience? Like, did someone kind of sneak it up on you one time, or is this just being extra cautious?
Well, actually, it's something that we've had happen on a regular basis. From watching intel channels and things like that. You see people report, hey, hostiles came through a hole in X system, and tackled whatever. And we kind of tend to have a target on our backs, being a bigger alliance, and us being a bigger corp that. You get that a little bit more often than you do in some other places. So it's just been one of those things for the last few months that I've learned to do. And, depending on the size of the hole, it depends on what you try and roll it with.
Right. So obviously you have some experience with this. Do you always do it with your carrier, or have you done it with other ships before?
I generally do it with other ships, especially now. I don't really take the carrier through now. I've gone back to just using multiple tunes and heavier battleships and stuff that are a little bit more disposable, I guess is the easy way to say it.
Sure. So kind of, instead of taking a carrier, give us an example of maybe what you might fly, to do it now.
Yep. So, for example, if it's a large wormhole, I have a couple of unfitted mining ships. They have enough mass if you put armor plates on in the low and have a micro warp drive on to increase their mass. That's something most people may not know, is anytime you put a afterburner micro warp drive on, it increases the mass. And if you pass through the hole with the micro warp drive on, that's more reduction in the amount of mass that you're putting through the hole, which reduces how much more can go through it. So, I will generally do that, or I have a couple of, again, cheap battleships. It depends on where it's at, and what system I'm in, what resources I have. I've got things kind of spread out wherever I would normally rat or mine. And so that would be if it was a large hole. If it's a medium hole, the smaller the hole, the harder it really gets, because you have to make more passes. I actually, just a couple of days before, I was in a place where I didn't have many of my other tunes. I just had a Legion, and I think on a medium hole, it took me something like 50 passes with the Legion, with nothing but heavy armor plates in a big micro warp going back and forth through the hole.
That's some dedication. Wow.
Yeah.
So obviously taking a mining ship is, significantly cheaper than your carrier. Do you find your other kind of corp mates that are, do the similar activities as far as carrier ratting take this much care, or is this something that you kind of, I don't know, is this unique to you?
Some of them do. I wouldn't think that all of them do. And again, it depends on the person. For me, because I don't tend to, fly cheap ships, I guess, when I'm ratting. I would rather not have the surprise of, oh, look, there's 40 new people in local. So, I would rather take, the extra half hour or however long it takes me to roll a hole, just to be able to get that done. So it may be a little bit more unique to me.
Okay, awesome. And you kind of mentioned that you have stuff spread out. So does this mean if you were ratting in one system, but you know that a wormhole is in a system next door, would you go through the effort of even rolling that wormhole next door? Like, it seems like a lot of whack-a-mole kind of thing.
Yeah. Before I start ratting, and then, generally during my breaks, if I'm going on a big ratting spree, I'll take a break every, 2.5 hours or so, and then take some time, go pick up salvage and loot and things like that. And then I'll do some more scanning just to see if there's any new holes. But, the place where our corp lives, there's about 4 systems around that we as a corp, will use. And, without getting into too many details, we'll use certain systems for ratting and mining. So, I feel a little bit of a responsibility to the corp to, do what I can to save them as well. So, I like doing the exploring and going through wormholes and things like that anyways.
Awesome. So that, this isn't a story of just some dummy getting stuck in a wormhole. Like, you seem to take great care as far as for yourself and your corporation. It just so happened you chose the wrong ship that day.
Yeah, and a couple of things. Normally when I do this, in the times that I've done it in the past with a carrier, I've even done it with a dread in the past as well.
Okay.
But the times that I've done it before, I generally will make sure that I have a probe launcher or or a mobile depot so I can, refit. This just happened to be the one instance where I was like, I'll be able to make 2 passes through this, and either it'll be, critical or it'll collapse on my way back through. And it was just a simple judgment call that cost me a little bit of time.
Yeah, I'll take risks, and you can't get everything down to 0 as far as mitigating, and occasionally bad stuff happens, which I guess creates interesting experiences, right?
Yes.
So take us through, I guess, kind of rewind a little bit. Take us through kind of how that day started for you, or you undocked your carrier. Kind of take us through what happened, and then maybe kind of once that whole collapse, I'd love to hear in your words, like, what were you thinking, and what were your next steps, that sort of thing.
Yep. So again, I mentioned I had already gone into the hole and scanned the exits with the scepter, and came back in and looked at the hole, said, I'll just grab the carrier. got to the station, undocked, made sure, that, my bookmarks were still where they should be, and then started to roll a hole. And as I mentioned earlier, I got one pass in and then back out, and then went back in, and that's when the hole collapsed behind me. And admittedly, at first I was frustrated, maybe very upset, because I'm looking at this like, oh, here we go, very expensive clone, very expensive carrier. And I really don't want to be the guy that just self-destructs in Wormhole. And, obviously I've been watching your stream and things like that. And at some point, I mentioned it to the corp, kind of told them what was going on in our voice comms and in chat. And, I was just kind of sitting there for a little bit, and, I was kind of looking at what else was in the system, and, found myself a nice little safe spot. And so, I'm kind of going back and forth, upset, what do I do here? And so then I went and looked, on the website, and remembered, hey, wait, they do offer a rescue service. That, I don't know, we're Nullsec Corp, and what's interesting is the moment that I used to be in some of the other intel channels in HiSec, gank intel and things like that, and a lot of those, when you join a Nullsec Corp, will immediately lock you out.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't sure. So, I waited probably an hour or two after I got stuck, and, kind of paced around my house a little bit, and and then just decided that, okay, well, I'll reach out. So, joined the channel in game just to see, and waited a little bit. One of the guys said, hey, somebody will message you here shortly. And that kind of started the rescue process from there. But, at first, I will tell you, when I came through and I watched, and I, like, on screen watched that hole close behind me, my heart dropped.
No doubt. So you tell your core mates that this happened. What type of reactions were you getting from them?
People were like, how, what, why? There was definitely some of that. And, it wasn't, nobody, was kind of, nobody was really giving me shit about it, to be honest. But, I got some questions, and, people asked, hey, did you scan it down? Is there any exits that you think you can make it through? Things like that. And, how are you going to get out, right? Try to get a little bit of advice. None of them had been in this exact position before. So, yeah.
Awesome. So you had some, it sounds like you may be on pretty good terms with the core mates. Like, nobody seems to haze you or anything like that. They actually were trying to give you some ideas of how to deal with it. So
yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So you reached out to Eve Scout Signal Cartel, and kind of take us through the steps as far as how did that process go, as far as maybe asking for help and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, joined the in-game channel, and, just posted that, hey, I'm stuck in a wormhole, and kind of explained the situation. Very expensive ship. I don't know if at first I necessarily mentioned that I was stuck in a carrier, because I didn't know how that would affect the situation at first, intel, things like that. So, I waited, it was a little bit, and then I think it was Marcos that was the first person to reach out to me.
Okay.
Asked me, where I was at, what the name of the hole was. Did I know if there was an exit, that I could go through, what my status was as far as were there hostiles and things like that. So, we kind of had a back and forth there a couple of times via message, and then we opened up a chat together and talked a little bit. And then, he said, we'll get somebody to start looking. I expect a chat from somebody. And then that's when Igaze reached out to me.
Wow. So kind of, I'm assuming you had to ask you were asked some of the similar questions that your core mates did, right? As far as, possible solutions to your problem, right?
Yep, definitely.
And how did you feel treated, like, from Eve Scout Signal Cartel? Were you treated kind of, kindly, or did you feel dumb, or how did that go?
Well, I guess for myself, I felt a little small,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to say it.
but no, it was the treatment was absolutely amazing. It was done very professionally, and I give you guys all the credit in the world. Both when Marcos reached out to me, and then when Igaze reached out to me, sent me the message. I've actually got it open here right now. Letting me know his name, his position with Eve Scout, letting me know that they already knew the system that I was in, and then asking me some questions about, my situation in general. And it was very, very well done.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so I don't want to stall out here, but basically what we're going to do is going to take a short pause, and then we're going to introduce iGaze, who has already been mentioned. You see him on the screen. He's part of Signal Cartel, Eve Scout, um, obviously explorer, but also loves doing the rescue stuff. So what we'll do is introduce iGaze, kind of hear kind of similar things as far as interest in the game, how long it's been playing, and then what we'll do is we'll pick up the story from there with iGaze, kind of like what iGaze had to go through and that sort of thing. So, iGaze, hi, how's it going?
Not too bad.
Thanks for being patient. So far, it's a intriguing story. Um,
Yeah, I
so
learned a few things there I hadn't heard yet either. So
yeah, I think that's kind of like the fun part about this. Besides sharing this with other people, I have a feeling you two are connecting on getting a little more information. So, and we do rescues quite often. So it's not like we get to do a big debriefing and hang out with who we rescued and that sort of thing. Normally it's a congratulations and good luck, and we'll see you again some other time. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about like maybe when you started playing the game and what you've been up to and what type of activities you enjoy, that sort of thing.
like Soulis, I actually started in about 2007.
Oh wow.
I played through to about 2011, mostly just PvE, mucking about. I never left my rookie core because the group in that core, which was Center for Advanced Studies, was actually really good. But I started doing stuff. My life got messy, and I signed off in 2011. Came back in January of this year. Got potted a couple times, and then found Signal Cartel.
Oh, interesting. So one of the things with Signal Cartel and Eve Scout is we have quite a few new players because exploration is a really great place to start in the game. You get to see a lot of different things. You get to learn about surviving, scanning, making money, that sort of thing. So you had some experience. What brought you to Signal Cartel in the first place?
The big one was that I wanted to do more exploring, and so I took off and went into low sec, started running some sites, died a few times, and then just started doing what I do, which is start researching, just how do I survive this stuff. And Signal Cartel kept coming up, and then I found your guys's you and Minxie doing your Vegas talk, and watching you two talk, I just went, I know these people.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us, so you like doing exploring now, and what brought you to the game originally in 2007, I guess?
I would say also like Soulis. I honestly can't remember exactly what it was, but whether it was an ad or something I saw online. But once I got in and got past a little bit of the learning curve, I think what I really liked about it was just how big it was. I think you can wander around in Eve, and people have wandered around in Eve for years, and you never feel like you know even a fraction of what there is to know and what's going on. And I really like that.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about Eve Scout Signal Cartel Rescue Services, kind of what is offered, and how do we engage other pilots, that sort of thing.
So there's two aspects to the way Eve Scout Rescue works, and one is the rescue cache program, where anyone who's been in wormholes now, especially the last few months, where we've gotten pretty aggressive about getting caches out there. We leave at locations that we can direct people to a container anchored that has probes and a launcher in it. So our regular pilots are out just scanning around and doing their exploring thing, can take their time and plant those for us and tend them and make sure they're still alive and all that sort of thing. So that's the first aspect.
Right. So they're flying around with like little secure containers with these supplies, and then they deposit them, and then they update. We have a database that has all these locations. So then what happens is like, how does that help pilots? If you want to explain that.
Well, first, I think the first big thing it does is it advertises us.
Right.
When you're flying around in wormhole space, and right now it's in half of the systems, you see a container that says Eve Scout Rescue on it. You know we're out there, and we're available. The other one is oftentimes if people are just missing probes and they already have a launcher, those containers have probes in them. So if you need probes and one of those containers is handy, give us a call and we'll direct you on how to get to it and get some probes so you can get yourself out.
Right. So they'll reach out to us, and that's kind of part of the, I guess, conversation is, do you have probes? Do you have a probe launcher? And if they don't have a probe launcher, do they have a mobile depot? And we find out what wormhole they're in, and if there happens to be a cache there that's still active, which is difficult for us to do. If you guys are not aware, like a secure container can stay out in space for 30 days. It can't be combat scan down, but it can be directional scan down. So the way that we leave these is they are somewhat accessible, meaning if you get to a planet that they're near, you might be able to find your way to one. But they're typically password protected, so no one can just go there and take everything out, but they certainly can blow it up. And so that's difficult to maintain this, because it's basically every 30 days things are expiring. This is like putting produce out in the supermarket. We have to keep supplying them, otherwise they'll go away. So as Trifton in chat mentioned, we're like 47.9% of all wormhole systems right now, which is, I think we've had higher, but that's quite the accomplishment. And there's been an aggressive campaign to do that. And those that don't know, like the way that this works is that pilots that do deposit these, they get credit for it. And we have a very, very small budget for this. So many of them just do it for the idea of content or a different activity for themselves. It's like a little other mini game that we can have. And everything that we, I guess, support that program with is through the kind donations of other pilots that, appreciate what we're doing. So take us through the other aspect of the rescue program, Igaze.
Yep. So the other aspect is the actual search and rescue. So as Soulis was saying, people will come into our Eve Scout channel and say, I'm stuck in a hole. And if there's a cache around, our people will do their best to help them get it. But if we can't get them out at that point, then we start a full search and rescue. And we have a database for that. And whoever is first talking to the pilot will go into the database, put in the entry, and then the coordinators at that point will come in. One of the coordinators, and that's one of the things I do, is look at one of those requests, and we'll send an email or email off to the pilot just to confirm all the things. And that's what Soulis was saying, the email, it's got all of the questions, to confirm that, yes, they are stuck in a particular place, and there's no way out for them.
Right.
And then at that point, we'll mark it as an open request once we get a response from them. Because sometimes we send out we send that email out, we never hear from them again. So, sometimes they've either self-destructed or taken off, or, so at that point we won't follow up on it. But once we hear back, it's game on, and it goes into our database. And we have a really nice tool now, which is our co-pilot, Allison.
Yeah.
And she just runs in a web browser, and when we enter a new wormhole system, she'll tell us, number one, is there a rescue cache there? Number two, does it need tending? And number three, is there a search and rescue request there? So typically our pilots will fly into a system. They fly into a system where someone needs to be found. We'll hear about it right away, and then we can go off and hunt them. A little different with Soulis, because we'll get into that, but we found him a little bit differently.
Gotcha. So this Allison tool that we have, which is kind of go into that a little bit more, is developed by some of our members. And yeah, it basically tracks your location as you're moving through space, just like any kind of wormhole mapping tool, that sort of thing. It uses the CCP's API, simply put. and it can track your location. Based on that, then when you move into a new system, then Allison, that's the name of this tool, she'll talk to you, and she has some really kind of fun things that she'll say too, little Easter eggs, other things, but she'll also report back to you maybe how many, ships have been killed recently, that sort of thing. It's just kind of, a lot of times as explorers, we're kind of all by ourselves. So it's kind of a nice little thing to have, maybe another person flying with you in a way, right?
Oh yeah, she's great company.
Good company, yeah. All right, so it sounds like you sent off a mail to Soulis, and this initial mail, and I think Soulis still has it, but Soulis replied, and then what happened after that?
Yeah, well, yeah, the way it worked for me was like I sent the email off in the morning. I got to work, and I have the advantage that I can actually run Eve at work and in my spare time check things out. So I'd done that. Then at the end of the day, I had 15 minutes to kill before I went home, and I fired up Eve and almost immediately got a message from Soulis to say that he'd gotten my mail and yes, he needed help, and we ran it from there. And the interesting one there was he said he gave me the system he was in, and I went to a tripwire, and because all of our pilots are, I should say all of them, but a lot of them are mapping in tripwire so we can see what's going on. And I checked tripwire and I had no connections to where he was. So I'm going, okay, well, in those cases, what usually happens is we tell them, okay, well, we're going to have to wait, and we'll message you when someone finds your system. In Soulis's case, he said because he had already marked off all of those holes when he came in, he still had a hole he could go through, but he didn't. He told me he was a little nervous to go through it because he'd ours are in a reasonably safe place. But I said, you know what, go through. If it connects to something we've already mapped, that would be great, and then we're a few steps ahead. And he dropped through, and I'm trying to remember why we had so many people going in that timetable. We might have had a contest going on at that point, but the system he landed in had over 50, the chain was over 50 wormholes in it. So wow. All of a sudden I had 4 or 5 possible routes to try to get to him.
Wow, that's one of the things is like once we get a request from someone, we've kind of gone through all the different steps and protocol to try to find them. And that certainly Tripwire is always one of those, right? Like looking at all our data that we have and see what's available. And then if there isn't a connection or you don't have another possibility, yeah, there's this kind of waiting game. And you kind of, for me, it's always, I think as far as the client or the person that's stuck, like they understand. But from our perspective, we don't know if it's hard to guarantee a certain time frame, right? Like what do you normally tell someone like Soulis if you don't have a connection? You could say what it's going to be a day to a week, or how do you kind of let them down easy?
Well, Soulis noted that our emails were very professional. That's because we actually spent a lot of time and we wrote up a decent amount of boilerplate for them, so we don't actually have to type them out. And when we're talking to them about they're going to have to wait, we don't actually give a time frame. Right. All we do is say we're working on it. Our pilots are out there, which they are, because we have people all over Wormhole space. And oftentimes within a week or two, we'll have someone. I've seen them go longer. A lot of it depends on the type of system they're in. If you're in kind of a deep C6 or something like that very rarely connects to known space, a lot of our explorers still tend to stay pretty shallow. That's pretty common. It's the well-populated area.
Right.
So, but we do send an email every week to confirm that someone's still there, that they still want to be rescued. And one of the questions we do ask on all of our things is how many ISK are you sitting on? Like,
right.
Is it worth it to you to wait? Because, it can take time.
Right. So in the case of, say, someone has only like maybe 100 million ISK of a ship or that sort of thing and no implants, they're less likely going to wait weeks and weeks and weeks. They'll just possibly self-destruct after a couple of days if they even wait that long. Like, is that kind of your experience, or does it kind of case-by-case basis?
There's a little bit of case-by-case, but I think it definitely is the case. We do get a fair number of people where we say, okay, we don't have a connection. You're going to have to wait. And they'll say, okay, well, we're going to wait sometimes they'll just say 24 hours, or I'm going to wait 2 or 3 days and then I'll self-destruct. And so there's definitely those. Some people are remarkably patient, though.
Interesting. Right. Okay, so you've exchanged these mails. Soulis, when you got this mail as far as, hey, what did you guys start? Take me through, like, when you talked Igaze and Soulis as far as moving to this other wormhole. So why don't you guys share about that a little bit more?
Well, I think, when, what kind of went through my head, obviously, he did ask a question, what are you sitting on and things like that. I don't know if that had been completely communicated to that point. And, when I explained the situation that, it was basically sitting on 12 billion ISK, that it was definitely something I was willing to wait on. So he started looking, and of course, as he mentioned, said that I should. And I think after he went and checked, he then said, asked me if I had checked any of the connections, and I had said, yeah. I knew that there was another very large exit into another wormhole that I could take, and of course, being apprehensive. So I jumped, I went ahead and went to that hole and jumped through. And actually, that ended up being even more safe than the first one that I was in.
Okay. So take me through when someone asks you kind of what you're sitting on. That's not a question typically that we trust other people with. So did you kind of hold on to that idea, or did you want to bluff how much you were sitting on, or take me through that? Because I think that's kind of interesting to Eve. We don't trust a lot of people often, right?
Right. And the thing is, like, for me, at that point, I had everything to gain, right? Because I was basically sitting on, if I didn't get out of the situation, it's not, a cheap loss. And so, obviously I knew your guys' reputation. I watched you on stream for, the last 10 months. And, so I thought, well, if I'm going to have a problem out of anybody, it's not going to be these guys. So, that was kind of my thought process, and I had no problem, telling them, hey, it's definitely nothing cheap.
Right. Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for trusting us with that. It certainly is, again, something that people wouldn't normally share. But I think that's kind of unique to our relationship with, all the pilots in New Eden. All right. So you jumped into this other wormhole, and it happened to be a safer place. What do you mean by that?
So actually, the first hole that I was in had a citadel that belonged to a hostile corp. Actually, well, it had an Astra house in it that belonged to a corp that was actually marked as -5 to us.
But like already,
yeah,
you guys had bad standings with them. Okay.
Yeah. So we had bad standings with them, and so obviously I kind of got myself to a space of a safe spot away from that.
Sure.
And when I went in, usually before I would roll a hole anyways, that's one of the things that I look for is, okay, is there any activity? And maybe I'll sit and wait for a little bit just to see if I see anybody on dock or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't seen any activity this whole time. And so when I went through into the second hole, it actually happened to be somebody that we were light blue, whether they were a Brunner Corp or just other blues to us. It just worked out so that way I could actually go and safe log on that Astra house.
Oh, so you actually could sit on the Astra house tethered?
Yep.
Oh, wow. And obviously you had to fly over to it just to find out if you can tether. Like sometimes I've seen them, I'm like, oh, it would be really cool if I could sit on this, but sometimes it doesn't quite work out. So, and obviously, maybe people don't know this, but safe logging is the thing where you hit escape on your keyboard and you do the log off safely. And that'll take up to 30 seconds. And believe it or not, like that 30 seconds, seems like an eternity when you're sitting in a ship of, that value. And then of course, logging back in, you're kind of holding your breath and wanting to cloak up as quickly as possible. Or did you actually have a cloak? I didn't even ask you that yet.
I did actually have a cloak,
Okay.
and that's the one thing that I did remember to change out before I undocked the NID, is I did have a cloak. So
right. And certainly it didn't mean that you could have actually moved into that other wormhole depending on the size of it, because of the size of your ship, right? So
Right.
had it been like a lower class wormhole, you would have been stuck where you were at.
Correct.
Cool. All right. So Igaze made the suggestion to check it out. So take us through that. Like, so you jumped in. Igaze, did you at that point search up on Tripwire? How did you find out that this might have been a good thing?
Well, once he got into the hole, I asked him what the what the name of it was, and I did go right into Tripwire and check it, because that's basically our big tool for doing these rescues. Is all of our pilots mapping things in Tripwire. It is the biggest aid, and in this rescue, it was an enormous aid.
Right. So if you're a single cartel member listening right now, and you're not using Tripwire, definitely, and it doesn't mean you have to be part of the rescue at first, but you can actually help by just mapping things that you're doing. I know that it might be a hassle sometimes, but you can imagine how much of a help for someone like Igaze and Soulis to be able to use even that data. It's super easy to use if you've spent any time with it whatsoever, especially if you're spending time in wormholes. All right, so you found the wormhole in Tripwire, and you said that there were 4 to 5 different possible routes to it.
Yeah, there were a number. I was in Thera that day, so the first one was I actually saw a route from Thera.
Oh wow, you're like, oh, this will be easy to get to him. I mean, what was your plan?
Yeah.
So if you could get to him, then you kind of what would be your next step? I guess kind of help us understand what would you do first? Yeah.
Well, the first thing that happens when we find this system, so you have a pilot, he's in a system. We either have a pilot in the system because it was found, or in this case, I moved him and he ended up on a chain that we could see. So the next step is get there. Whether or not we can get someone out right away or not, as soon as we have someone in the system, then as far as I'm concerned, we're golden, because it might take time to figure it out from there, but we now know where the system is.
Right. Like once you get entry, then you can kind of make some plans on how to best help that pilot, right?
Yeah. And so that was my aim here, was to get either another one of our pilots into the system or get myself into the system. And we did have one other pilot try to get in, but he got cut off because the route he took ended up with a hole collapsed on him.
Right.
So he didn't make it.
Right. And certainly like time is of the essence at this point, right? Because wormholes they'll likely be gone in hours, right? So there's kind of a short window that you had to deal with.
Yeah, we never know how long it's going to take to get there, and how long any one of those holes is going to be all around for. So like the Thera route I took was a bust.
Okay.
So I ended up switching. I had been in an Ares because I was doing Thera scanning, and an Ares is kind of handy for that. But I've dropped into Paleo Station, switched out to my Astro. And then what I did is actually use our Thera server, like a Thera wormhole service, and I looked at all of the HiSec links that were on that chain and started plugging them in to see which ones were close to Thera.
Oh, right. So you could just drop out of Thera and then maybe get back into a new chain. And you were doing this on your interceptor, so you can travel pretty quickly and not have to worry about bubbles, that sort of thing.
Well, I was in the interceptor because I was actually doing Thera scanning. Yeah.
Okay.
To maintain all that information, and then I immediately switched to using that information.
Right. So at this point, when you dropped into this more friendly wormhole and let Igaze know, were you kept like in the loop as far as every time kind of one route got closed, or were you just did you log off at that point, or were you kind of more active during this period of time?
It was actually kind of a mixture of both. He let me know, kept me updated, was sending mails to my alt. I gave him that information so he could have that, so I could stay, I could log in on my alt and stay logged off on my main for most of it, as a, kind of as a precaution, I guess. And so, we communicated that way. And, he was really good about, sharing the information, shared me a screenshot of, what the, chain looked like for him to get to me. Because the other thing you got to think of is, I'm in a capital, so the only thing I can exit through is a very large.
Right.
And so, he was just working on getting to me first. And so, I mean, this process, went on for probably a day of, kind of logging in, logging out, him getting to me, and, deciding if we were going to wait a little bit more and things like that. So, obviously he, has to work and things like that, which I respect.
Yeah.
And, so, it was really, really good communication throughout the whole process.
Okay. So Igaze, you couldn't make it through Thera, and you figured out maybe another route to take. Take us how many jumps did it take? Or I mean, you don't have to recall exactly, but yeah, continue on.
I think ultimately, I mean, I think it was 6 or 7 jumps from Thera to get to the high sec hole I needed. Then I had to scan my way back down it, because while I had tripwire, I still had to actually make the links.
Right.
But it was only 3 or 4 through there. The issue that was that the route I took was frigate only.
Of course. Right. And again, the whole point is just getting there, because once you're there, you can, find some new routes out that would maybe be more manageable, that sort of thing, right? So, what kind of supplies did you bring with you?
All I had was what I normally carry, which was my rescue cache set, which is, a bunch of probes and launchers.
Okay.
I'm realizing now if I'd had a mobile depot with me, things would have gone a little bit faster.
I suppose. I mean, one of the hard things about mobile depots is the only person that can use it is the person who launched it, right? So typically, if you wanted someone else to use a mobile depot, you'll have to exit the ship that you have your mobile depot in and have them board it in order
Unless
for them
they're
to
in a
launch
carrier.
it. Yeah. And then, yeah, so Soulis would have a jump out of his carrier, hop in whatever ship you're flying, provided he has the skills to, launch the mobile depot, leave your ship, get back in the carrier, then could use the mobile depot again. But obviously, he had a dedicated scanner at that point once you arrived in the system. So were you online at that point, Soulis, or how did that happen? I guess you sent a mail, or at I want to know how that feeling, how did you guys feel at that point?
When I got there, it only took me about an hour from the initial conversation to get there. And then I basically said, I'm here. There wasn't really any route out, and I actually had to get home.
Right.
So I basically said, I'll be back in a few hours.
Right.
And then we'll start working it from there. So I also figured at that point, since he was sitting on as much value as he was, that he'd be more than willing to be patient while I got home, had some dinner, and then got back in the game.
Oh, okay. Oh, and I guess Bruco, he's mentioning that you could have possibly put the mobile depot in, I guess, a fleet hangar on the carrier, which would be great.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Okay, so you guys finally hooked up at some point as far as timing between work and family and other commitments. Take us through the next steps.
Yeah, so I mean, on my end, it was a lot of waiting, hanging out, doing things on my alt, and we had some communication back and forth on times that he would be available, and luckily it worked out hour wise. I'm lucky enough to be able to work at home and be online, so we just kind of communicated from there, schedules and sleep time and all of that stuff, and what we would do going forward.
Okay.
And I just kept scanning down routes, trying to find some way for him to get out. And there was a certain point in there where he mentioned that if I could get him a mobile depot, then because he's so large and the routes might be tricky, it's like I just kept hitting the C5 highway.
Right,
and,
of course.
And so he said, well, if you can find me a mobile depot and get it to me, then he could scan for himself, and then we could move on from there. And I did manage to find a low sec route out, not one that had any holes that he could use, but I got out, got a mobile depot, got back, and then I was sitting there. I've never dealt with capitals before.
Right.
And I was going through the process you were talking about, going, oh, how the hell do I give him this mobile depot when he pointed out that he's in a carrier and it has a fleet hangar, and all I had to do was fleet with him and drop it in his hangar.
Right. Right. And all this time, are you concerned when you're looking for maybe another route out that you might get, cut off again?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
I didn't.
you're looking at each wormhole to see if it's like reaching its natural lifetime and lots of things like that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you'd be very, very cautious. And normally when I'm exploring, I don't care if they collapse behind me. I can always find another way.
Right.
But doing this, it's you're always checking, you're always watching your mass, like the mass of that the hole's at and its lifespan. And I generally, unless I know when it flipped to end of life,
Uh-huh.
I don't trust them.
Right. Of course. Yeah, and certainly like anything could come up in your life, right? And you're out and maybe not be able to come back even within 4 hours or 5 hours, I guess. So it's always a possible threat. Okay, so
Yeah,
you got the mobile depot and you dropped in the fleet hangar. What happened next there, I guess?
well, the next thing that happened there was is I actually thought I was done at that point because he had indicated that from there he'd be able to scan his way out. It would just whatever time it took, um, and so I went all good, and I jumped over to the next system, which I'd been in before because I'd been scanning chains there a lot, and it had a new SIG in it, which I went okay, scan that down, and it turned out that was a null sec that could take a carrier. And
Oh
so I
wow.
immediately convoed him again and said, "You might want to come over here."
Okay, Soulis. So it's kind of brave because I mean it's nice that you got a mobile depot and stuff, but there's a lot of risks of flying a carrier around, taking wormholes, checking wormholes, that sort of thing. The locals can wake up anytime and try to
Right.
catch you. So um, kind of take me through that decision. That you're still comfortable with that, or did you not want to put
Yeah.
out our pilots any longer than they already had, that sort of thing?
Yeah, in my head again, and I try and be respectful of other people's time and gameplay and things like that. And this guy had already done a lot to help me. I mean, at this point, we're encroaching on roughly 2 days since the start of this. And and that's the thing. Like I look at it and I try to be considerate. Hey, there's probably other things this guy wants to do, and I appreciate all the help. And and so that's when I said, hey, if you can get a mobile depot and, then I can refit, I'll sit here and scan. And if you happen to come across something over the next couple of days and I don't, let me know and, we'll figure it out from there. And so then he says, okay, and starts kind of going his way, and then convoys me back. Hey, I found an exit, and I think the first exit that was found, and correct me if I'm wrong, Igaze, the first exit was a long ways away from a home, and then the second one ended up being a lot better. And I'll let Igaze correct me if I was wrong there, and then we'll go forward.
I'm looking at the stuff I have right now, and from there, there was one null sec and one low sec. So I think it was just the one null sec was right where you wanted it.
Right. I think it was the low sec one that was big enough, and it was a ways away. It would have taken me like 12. I think I had it as like 12 sinos or something like that home. Which in a carrier and waiting and trying to move sino alts around is a couple of days of travel time. But we ended up actually that nullsec hole, and this is probably the best part of the story, is that the nullsec hole ended up being 5 jumps from our forward staging. So I could immediately, exit the hole, light a sino with an alt, and jump to a safe forward.
Wow, yeah, that couldn't have been any better. And those that are kind of not used to capital movements, there's a thing called jump fatigue. So the further that you jump, the longer your fatigue is. So with 12 jumps, yeah, you certainly would have been thinking multiple days through hostile space, possibly, I mean, to get home, right? Like that's got to be the worst use of your time. But at the same time, you would at least not be in a wormhole anymore. You just be in a different kind of, I guess, predicament, right?
Yeah. And there's some things you can do to mitigate it and things like that, but either way it goes, at the very least you got to wait. If you don't want to continue to build fatigue in a capital, you got to wait 45 minutes, even on a like a 5 light year jump. at the max range of 7 on a carrier. With JDC5, you need to, you're an hour and 15 minutes in that neighborhood.
Right.
And so that's the thing is, then you're okay, do I want to sit here and, jump into a system, immediately safe log, wait the hour and 15 minutes and try and do that for the next 14 hours? Or do you want to try and make as many jumps as you can back to back and rack up to the max jump fatigue time?
Right. So you were looking with 12 jumps, at least 12 hours or more, not to count scouting where you could actually light a Sino to, make your next midpoint, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I would have used Dotland to kind of, play in my jump ranges and safe spots and things like that. But yeah.
Right. Okay. So that was at least one option, but then the second option showed up where you were only five gates away, it sounds like, right?
5 gates away from a completely safe spot, and then it took me another 2 Sinos to get back to where I started.
Oh, okay. But at least you knew once you got to your forward staging point, you're kind of somewhat safe as far as Eve goes.
Yeah. Right.
Awesome. So let's just say you started. What day of the week did this start for you? When did you finally make it home?
So let me go back and look at the messages real quick.
Sure.
So my first go ahead.
I was gonna say the first day was July 4th, according to my to the report I wrote.
Right. Okay. So what day of the week is that? I just want to kind of put it in context.
That would have been a Tuesday.
Oh, that's right. So Tuesday, July 4th. What day of the week did you make it back home where you could, safely rat again, I guess?
So it was, we switched, well, he got me the mobile depot on the 6th. So a little over 2 days. And then, once I, went through the wormhole and then jumped to the fort, I waited a little bit, and then it was the next day. So the 7th when I was back home.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty quick turnaround. As Igaze says, we typically don't want to set, crazy expectations, except, hey, we're out there. But some of these things could take weeks. So 3 days is certainly, a great turnaround. But a lot of coordination and communication happened through that time, though.
Definitely. Definitely.
All right, so this is probably a good time to maybe share with us maybe some lessons learned. I think it would probably be appropriate. Let's start with you, Soulis. Is there anything that you've maybe learned good and bad about this? Not just your piloting skills, but maybe about, maybe like Signal Cartel or Eve Scout, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I think, I'll start on my side of the equation is, obviously, some risks aren't worth it, right? Time-wise and things like that. And, I knew going into it that I should have put a probe launcher on, and I didn't, right? So that's the first thing. If you're going into a wormhole, have a probe launcher and probes, especially in something very big, shiny, and expensive. And then also, for other people on the outside, it's, some of the things that went right was, I pre-scouted the hole. So, at least I knew that, if I hadn't have knew that there was another very large next door, this process could have taken a lot longer. Because one of the things that Igaze mentioned to me is that, that the first hole that I was in, they hadn't seen or logged in a couple of months, or it had only been seen a couple of times in a few months.
Right.
And the second one had been seen several times. So, and they already had the chains. So that helped out tremendously.
Right.
From, the Eve count standpoint and things like that, I think, because of, the culture of Eve, especially, nullsec and the things that you watch out for and, things like that, how it is with intel and stuff, there's a lot more distrust, I guess, is the easy way to say that. So, you kind of have to let that aside. And, luckily for me, I had watched the stream. I'd seen how you interact with people and stuff like that, and that already gave me a good feeling about it. And that's the thing is if you have that set up and that, hey, these are people that are actually trustworthy, it puts you at ease.
Right. It's often said people will can't even trust themselves, right? Much less trust other people. But I'm glad that you took the leap of faith to trust someone like us. There's not that many options out there that would, hopefully have the same outcome for you.
Yep.
So, Igaze, take us through. Like, are there some lessons learned? Have you maybe changed any of your process, or what happened after this? You shared it with, I guess, other Signal Cartel, rescue members, things like that. Take us through that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we like to do with our rescues is we encourage anyone who does a rescue to write it up for our forums to share the experience and teach people how these things happen and how they go down and that sort of thing. So I went through and wrote the whole thing up. The takeaways I took from it in the end, the big one for me was how important tripwire was to our process. As Soulis mentioned, this could have been a lot longer if we hadn't found an immediate route to him. So that was a big one. There was some little dealing with carriers was a new one for me. I learned that carriers are very big, especially when you fly a little Astro up to them.
Yeah.
But also the fact that with a carrier, I could actually just drop in a mobile depot and that sort of thing. That was stuff I'd never dealt with before. There were also some wormhole navigation ones. This was my first big experience with what is commonly called the C5 highway. Because as I tried to scan out from where he was, you'd get onto one C5 and they have an H296 static, and then all of them are like that. And trying to find routes out of there is actually difficult.
Right. What you're looking for is a null sec exit or a low sec exit out of there, right? Because typically those will just connect to each other, C5 to C6, C6 to C5, as you're mentioning. And you're looking for like a roaming wormhole that actually might have that other connection, more than likely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So to confirm it, the whole mobile depot one was interesting. Just the whole idea that, especially if you find someone who's big like this, that you might be better off if you can just get them the tools they need, which is actually what we tried to do with the rescue caches, is get the pilot the tools they need and then they can get out.
Right. All right, so this rescue happened, and did you guys just kind of wave to each other and say goodbye, or is this like the first time that you two have maybe talked since then?
We had a couple of messages back and forth afterwards. This first time that we've been on actual voice counts, been able to talk to each other. I think I saw him come through a wormhole in our space not too long ago, and I made sure to tell him he doesn't have anything to worry about in our space as long as I'm there.
Exactly. I remember that one.
Yep. And that's one thing. I made it very clear to, the people in my court. Now, listen, these guys literally saved me 12 billion ISK. It's hands off, right? Or I'm going to start AWOXing people.
You're going to get turned real dark real soon, just to help out somebody that was a friend to you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And especially for Igaze and for Johnny, and that's the thing, is that you guys especially are always going to be good in my book when it comes to that. And I think it's just fair. And I think I made sure, even though it was never asked or required, I did some things to help take care of Igaze for his time, and if he wants to share that, he can.
Awesome. Well, that would be a kind of an interesting transition. Obviously, we don't have to share all that, but the way that our programs work entirely, like for our Thera service, for our rescue caches, even when it comes down to rescues such as Soulis, there is no talk really about money or compensation for our services, except many times someone like Soulis probably would ask, well, how much does this cost, that sort of thing. And we operate on a complete like donation model. So it's kind of like, give what you feel is worth the value, or, how your heart leads you in those sort of situations. And so we kind of leave it up to that, which a lot of other organizations that might do rescue, they will go, oh, you're flying a 12 billion ISK worth of stuff. That will cost you 2 billion ISK or something. They'll have some sort of percentage scale or some other means of being compensated. But we kind of leave that open-ended, which kind of puts us again, in a vulnerable spot, because certainly Igaze spent a lot of time and effort, and anybody else that was involved in it, of trying to get you home. But take us through that, Igaze. Like, how do you like that model? Would you prefer something different, or does it seem to work out? And the way that I look at it personally, and I don't want to sway you, but it sounds like you had an amazing experience, even though it was a lot of work. So share with me from like your perspective, Igaze.
It works great for me. Again, I had a great time doing it. I like the process of doing it, but it also reflects some stuff I do in real life. Where I am, I do volunteer ski patrol work, where I actually spend a whole lot of money to go out to a ski hill and do first aid and help people out and do stuff, which I don't get paid for. It actually costs me money to do. But again, I like doing it. So this is, somewhat similar, just in a game form.
I don't really get cheesy, but that's quite the connection. I had like literally chills right there, like that you're able to maybe even use some of your skills and just kind of care for other people in a game like Eve. That's what it sounds like to me a little bit.
I find it that way. I much prefer talking to people online or in game, when it's, people are being nice and it's grateful and you have nice interactions with people, to some of the other kinds of interactions you might find in Eve.
Right. Yeah, and it certainly sounds, Soulis, to your credit, you're quite the considerate person as far as, hey, thanks for the probes and the mobile depot and the probe launcher, and I don't want to waste any more of your time. Like, I think hopefully many of us would react that way, but it's definitely not the stereotype Eve kind of mentality, right? For, where it's all about us, but you actually took, Igaze, even though he could have probably spent more time with you to kind of give him the chance out to get a break from it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I would look at it if I was on the other side of the situation. I love to help people. Even in my corp, I try and do things to teach people and help out the new guys that come on and things like that. And for me, that's important. So I look at what kind of time would this have taken me, and the effort spent and things like that. And that's when I was like, hey, if you can get me this, I don't want to use up too much of your time. I'm sure there's other things you want to be doing in the game. And it's just, there's got to be a little give and take in that.
Yeah Why do you have to be so reasonable, it sounds like? So so this is kind of a treat. So I read this write-up that Igaze put up on our forums. And I was like, this is an amazing story. In fact, I think it's probably the single biggest rescue we've ever done, as far as if we were to put in value. And that's easy to communicate for people. I honestly, it would mean just as much to someone else that didn't have as much value. It's all relative. Obviously, Soulis has some means to have these pilots and ships and that sort of thing. So it's probably not, even though 12 billion is a lot for a lot of us and it would hurt, hopefully you would recover. So I read this story, and then I think I think I mentioned it on stream, and then Soulis piped up and it was like, oh, I think you actually brought it up like a little bit before that, as far as, hey, thanks, one of your guys rescued you. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. We do all that all the time. And I didn't get a chance to associate it until maybe like later in the stream or the next day or something like that. And that was kind of a special treat to kind of go, oh, I just read this and here he is in my stream. And it was kind of neat that we were all connected in some way, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, and again, I can't remember, I think I had mentioned it, and I think you were talking on stream about the rescue service a little bit, and then that's when I piped up, and yeah, it's been nice, and we've had some good conversations since then. Of course, I'm always one to watch the stream when I can.
Sure. So I think this probably would be a good time to ask any questions of chat if you guys are around and you have any questions that maybe kind of left unanswered in your mind. Now would be a good time. That would be for any of us, but more specifically for Igaze or for Soulis, if you guys have any.
Well, I will say, and I've been kind of watching, watching chat here, and one of the things that came up is why that ship, and why that amount of ISK, and you kind of alluded to this, that I might have the means to do that, and the one thing I've always operated on in Eve is don't fly what you can't afford to replace, and I think that's a good lesson for a lot of people, right?
Right.
I've come across so many people in this game that go out in these really expensive ships and then can't afford to replace them, and and it's a sad thing that some people even stop playing because of big losses, and that's definitely an important lesson for a lot of the people in chat. But if anybody wants to know, yeah, it was definitely would have been expensive, but I technically could have replaced it.
Sure. But nonetheless, you wouldn't have forgot it, right? It
Right.
leaves a scar of some sort.
Yeah, it still would have hurt. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I, one of my alts last week, I got dropped on with a Rourke, and that was a, just in the ship was a 12 billion ISK loss.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think like the biggest loss I've ever suffered is maybe 5 or 6 billion. But I don't forget it, and I certainly learned stuff from it. And I suppose that's how I always kind of turn around bad situations. Is there's always something to learn, whether it be something I could have done differently or recognize how well someone else did something else, right? Like they dropped on me and I maybe wasn't quite paying attention, or they were really sneaky, that sort of thing. And so there's always something to kind of turn around to something, even a devastating loss, into something that you can learn, like an education. And that's typically how I'll approach it. So it doesn't look like we have one question from Sky Iron, which is, how many rescues do you think you've done in total, Igaze?
It's a tricky question. I think the direct ones like this, where I was the main pilot involved in guiding someone out, was maybe 3 or 4.
Okay.
But especially being the coordinator position I'm in, I'm actively involved with probably a number of other ones where I was helping out or directing one of our pilots on what they should be doing to help someone else out. And in this case, we only I got managed to get to the hole, but typically we like to try to get 2 or 3 pilots into a hole where someone's stuck, just in case we can't get out right away.
Right.
So I don't know, more than 10. I think, but
yeah, like involved in some degree or another. That's awesome. All right. Well, this is probably a good time for like the telethon pitch. One of the things, as far as the rescue cash program that you heard about earlier, is something that we fund from other things that we've been given as far as donations, and it all works on donations at the end of the day. But we originally, I think, when we started the rescue cash program, which then also complements very well with active rescues like this one, is being able to maybe compensate our pilots on some level or another. And honestly, it's not very much. Someone that's tending a rescue cache, Igaze, do you have any idea how much maybe someone might make? Like, do you deposit them? So are you making maybe $1 million each time you drop one? Or I guess the money doesn't really matter, but just kind of put in people's perspective.
It's going to vary by week, just because it depends on how many people, because we have a fixed budget per week, and then that gets divvied up. So if lots of people are working, your per cache will be less. But I typically make 20 or 30 million a week just doing rescue caches, and I'm kind of average in my numbers. So
Yeah. So think about how active maybe someone like Igaze or other people are at, and what they could be maybe spending their time doing something differently. But if you like this sort of type of gameplay and you think that it's adds to the experience that Eve players have, then maybe consider donating. We don't typically go out and beg for money, that sort of thing. We kind of just do it passively. And in the case of like Soulis, it was kind of give what you want, and hopefully everybody made happy. But yeah, and Dead Pirate, who's in chat, we have a fixed budget and it's very small. I think right now it's like $500 million a week. And the way that it ends up happening is that depending on how many rescue caches are seeded over the course of a week, we split that 500 million between those. So in the case of maybe, say Igaze does 50 of those out of 500 that might get seeded that week, which again, if we have coverage over 1,200 wormhole systems, kind of put it together, that's quite a few. So what ends up happening is it works out to a very small amount. And just like Thera, just like the rescue caches, and even active search like Soulis, we mostly do it just, one, to be a service, and two, we find it fun being that sort of force in Eve. And then if we do get compensated for our time, it's just an extra bonus. So if you'd like to see that budget increase for them, again, I'm being very transparent. We basically have $500 million, 500 million ISK a week. It works out to about $2 billion a month that we've dedicated. And we've actually, I think we're almost all the way through what we originally set aside budget wise, which was like over 20 something billion. That had actually been donated to us early on in the program. So if you'd like to see that increase for our pilots, and you like seeing little rescue caches in the wormholes, or if you don't donate to us, because I'm traveling around all through wormhole space, and if you get anybody else's, you're seeing our rescue caches all over. So if you think that's a good thing, then definitely donate to us. If you think it's trash, go blow them up, have some fun. I doubt that you'll waste the time, but if you would like to support this and maybe make this a little bit more of a worthwhile exercise for people, or just to complement what they're already having fun generating content, then send a donation to the corporation Eve-Scout. Okay, you'll see right underneath my name, that is exactly the corporation that you need to send it to. And make sure that you put a note in there, rescues. And then that way, that money will get sent over to them and their program. I primarily spend most of my time in Thera and then supporting whatever else happens in the corporation or alliance. But I basically send over money to the people who are organizing that, which are amazing people. I could sit here all day talking about how great it is to have people who are as dedicated, and a couple of them are in chat. So, thank you. And Minxie, who just popped up in chat as well, and she would feel exactly the same. She's both of us are very thankful for the people that have gathered around us and are carrying the torch of what we hope to see happen under our, I guess, initiative. So send over a donation if you want to. It could be any amount, but obviously if that has the word rescue in it as far as the note, that'll get directed over to that program and will help that. In addition to that, tell your friends if they get stuck who they can reach out to. We, again, are very trustworthy. We're neutral. We will help anybody in need. The only thing that you can't reach out to us and ask for is the location of a specific hole that you might be in search of. Even if that happens to be a place where you have your own maybe pauses and that sort of stuff that you got locked out of, we typically don't. I shouldn't say we absolutely do not help out with those sort of rescues. We are out looking for active pilots that are stuck in wormholes. We're not a wormhole location service. If you're looking for that, there's other services like Wingspan that can help you out with that sort of thing. They are quite good at that as well. So I think unless you guys have any more questions, I really, really appreciate you guys being here. Soulis, thank you so much for your candor and taking the time out of your evening to share the story with us. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad to be here. And, another thing that, say to the audience, wormholes is definitely an interesting thing, like anything else in Eve. And, since this, I've actually spent a lot more time going through wormholes and refining my scheming skills and things like that. And it's been a good experience that caused me to do even more than I already had been.
Awesome. And Igaze, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening as well to share with us, and more importantly, being part of our corporation and finding us, and um, adding to the quality of who we are as far as reputation and service. So thank you again.
Thank you, and no problem at all taking the time to do this. And I'd also add, I'd like to thank you and Minxie for setting up Signal Cartel and Eve Scout. I love the world of Eve, but I'm not much of a PvPer, and it's not the type of thing I really enjoy doing, although I like watching other people do it. But you guys gave me a place where I can do the type of things I like to do.
Right. Okay, so we'll wrap up here as far as the interview. Thank you again, all those that joined us. We're going to take this down as a VOD and send it out over like Twitter and wherever else it might go. Again, share it with some other friends if you want a different type of story that is, Eve, instead of ships blowing up, people getting saved. And again, what we do is absolutely no judgment on how the rest of Eve plays. We just see this as another avenue for us to have fun. And if you like to play the game differently, we like that too. So thank you so much for listening. If you would like any more information, please join the in-game channel Eve-Scout. That's where you can find many people congregating, just nice, kind people helping each other. Not even maybe talking about us. It's like a little mini rookie chat, believe it or not. And then you can also reach out to us that way. In addition to that, you can check out our website at eve-scout.com. And then you can also head on over to our rescue site, which is going to be, I'll put it in chat for you guys. But you can also head over to everescue.com. There's no dashes. There's no www. So just evescoutrescue.com. So thank you again. Well, hopefully we'll get to do this again. Have a good evening. Thanks a lot.